All right. And good afternoon, and welcome to those watching this afternoon via the YouTube or whatever we may call it, so my apologies there. I would like to welcome you to the Crestwood School District Board of Education study session, which is dated for Monday, July 26, 2021. And at this time, I would like to ask Madam Secretary Najah to please take roll.
Here. Mrs. Elzayat.
Here.
Ms. Fawaz.
Here.
Mr. Garcia.
Here.
Mr. Janoon. Myself here. Ms. Kaminsky.
Here.
Mr. Saba.
Here.
Mr. Jerry McCorm. That
All
threw me
right,
off.
thank you.
It was just a sound
We
check.
had, I was just going to say, we have a quorum and we have 7 others that are sitting out there echoing our names, so it'll work. All right. We will dispense with the Pledge of Allegiance until the regular board meeting. And at this time, we have 3 items that are listed on the study session, which are our business update, we have a human resources update, and then, of course, our superintendent updates. This is also an opportunity for members of the board to ask questions of the administration, so feel free to make sure that you do that. And at this time, we will turn it over to Dr. Musalla.
Thank you, Mr. President. If I may request, if it's okay, I would like to move the superintendent student code of conduct report prior to the business report, just because it may take a little longer, and it'll give Ms. Morgan and Dr. Lazar an opportunity to adjust whatever they need based on timing.
Okay.
Is that okay? So in your packets, and for probably over a month or so now, each of you have had a copy of the updated district code of conduct. God rest her soul, former board president, Donna Ansonik, this was one of the first things that she asked me to work on, and when the pandemic hit, it took a back seat because, we triaged things as they went. But we reconvened 3 months ago, my apologies, where we brought back the teachers that were on the committee. We also had an invite for parents. I want to thank 2 parents for being there. Parent Najah Janoon, also known as Trustee Janoon, as well as Mrs. Lisa Musa came. And then other parents actually reached out to me afterwards and apologized for not being able to attend, but they were thankful, and they received copies of it, and they were told, if you have any feedback or anything, please let me know. So over this time, I'm hoping that the board had opportunities to review this, to come in with some questions as needed. It's a long document. Prior to the beginning, there's a few things I just want to emphasize and clarify and point out why changes were made. And again, none of these changes were made independently. These were recommendations and suggestions from me and my team to others that were part of the conversations. Also, within this student code of conduct, the very first thing that you will notice is we changed it from a student code of conduct to a district code of conduct. The purpose being is that if we're going to continue focusing on being a P14 district, we have to look at things as such, as the holistic. Looking at holistic, it doesn't only represent our students, it represents our staff, administration, everyone. Doesn't matter what level of administration, and with all due respect, the Board of Education as well. I'm of the philosophy that if we're going to be leaders, we have to lead through action, not through words, and we have to lead through what we do and how we do things if we expect others to follow suit. So that was the first change. And again, everything in here, there were some things that were changed again after recommendations from the teachers and or parents. And then finally, the last thing I'd like to say before I move further into this is this isn't for board vote tonight. Again, it's been in the packet for over a month, conversation, discussion, a study session tonight, and hopefully it will go to board vote in August. And then I spoke with Ms. Morgan, and our idea moving forward is that for all large documents as such, including contracts, we're going to be bringing in a third-party editing company who will edit all of our documents as a third party to help us to make sure that the grammar, everything makes sense, everything is lined up. It's more professional, more helpful for our population. So going through just a few key things that I want to discuss, and I'm going to reference pages if you want to flip through, just to, these are areas that I feel are important. First and foremost, you will see on page 7, the statement of non-discrimination is on page 7. In the original documentation, the statement of non-discrimination was in the middle. It wasn't, it should be up front and center. Everyone needs to understand that we are an equal opportunity, equal rights district. So we want to put that in the forefront. So that was just a simple move in terms of logistics and focus. Again, just changing student code of conduct to district code of conduct as we go through. A lot more focus on community, a lot more focus on we. You'll see in there's a lot more we instead of you, okay? Or student, it's we. And we have to have that.
Can I ask one question?
Yes.
Mr. Chair? Has this gone to legal yet?
Legal has helped me on the areas that dealt with bringing outside influences in, and that is further along in the document.
Okay.
Also, you will see that there is if you go to page 10, there is student, parent, Crestwood personnel bill of rights. And I think this is very important, and we added some pieces to this because everyone should have an understanding of what their rights are, what the students' rights are, what parents' rights are, what staff members' rights are.
One
Yes.
question.
Okay, can we go back to page 8? It says here, based on the above process, recommendations were made to the Crestwood Board of Education on future work related to the need to modify some of the existing Board of Education policies to align the policies with existing laws and current practices. Does that have to be included in there if we haven't done that yet?
Because we're going to do it.
We're going to do it.
We're going to, because that's one of the things that we discuss about having the retreat, is that we need to bring the policy committee in to have that policy discussion. And that is something that Dr. Lazar is going to discuss, because in our last policy subcommittee meeting, the policy subcommittee agreed to bring in Troon, I always say it wrong, Troon Law Firm to review all of our policies, because they already gave us a quote. So that's in there because it is going to be consistently reevaluated.
Okay, so does that mean we won't be able to use the district code of conduct until
No, we can.
that's done?
We
Okay.
can. We can still use the code of conduct because our policies are constantly updated. Our policies are not written in stone. So they're constantly updated, and that's why they're always reviewed yearly. Now, I'm not sure when was the last time the board reviewed policy. 2005. 2005. So now what we're saying is we're going to be reviewing policy yearly.
Sorry, can you say that again?
So board policies are constantly being reviewed and evaluated. They should be reviewed yearly. And usually you have, in this case, it would be, say it again?
2005.
Troon would be what's coming, Dr. Lazar is going to speak about it. We're going to be requesting to bring Troon in to review our policies on a yearly basis, and they'll be starting to review that policy. The last time our policies were reviewed was in 2005.
2005?
Correct.
Okay.
If I could for a minute, the policy committee started meeting and we started reviewing it, and that's when Mrs. Ansonek's health deteriorated, and that was last spring that we started doing that, and so I think we had 3 meetings on it and never finished. Prior to that, it had not been done since 2005.
So, Mr. Chair?
Yes.
So when you say ongoing and we want to make if we want to make changes throughout the year, are we able to do that, or do we have to wait till the following year when the board or committees come together again?
No, so the idea behind it is when you have subcommittee like the policy committee, when there's elements in the policy that are outdated and or have to be changed, for say, like example, with this pandemic, different things occurred. There were some things that the board approved during the pandemic. You can change them at any time. And if we follow process, it goes to the subcommittee reviews it, subcommittee comes back to the board as a whole, says, we're gonna, we had a subcommittee meeting, these are the notes, and this is what we're gonna be supporting administration on or recommending to the rest of the board. So we should be evaluating this policy yearly because things change constantly, especially too, when laws change in Lansing, it trickles directly down to us.
Okay.
And that's why by, having Troon, because they're one of our legal representative firms, they'll be on top of it for us to help us with that process. So it's not something that we have to take on, because we're not legal specialists as they are.
Thank you.
So then, page 9, I updated the superintendent's message. I just rewrote it, but, just to get some key points in. And again, this hasn't been grammatically checked yet, so please note that this is a final rough draft, if that makes sense. And then moving forward, I talk about the Bill of Rights. So I would like to jump real quick to page 12. I think it's important because it deals with the Board of Education, and basically here, this is not something I created. This is something that I drew directly from a combination of other districts that had in their district code of conduct.
What
And-
page you said?
Page 12.
12.
And really, basically, it says maintaining confidentiality. Adopting a budget provides programs and activities. Collaborate with students, teachers, administrative community to ensure that the code of conduct defines clearly everyone's responsibilities. Lead by example by conducting board meetings in a professional, respectful, and courteous manner. Address personal biases that may prevent equal treatment of all students and staff. Maintain a positive image of the Crestwood School District and its community. And if you move up and you look at school personnel responsibilities, and we talk about school personnel responsibilities, it's the same thing. It's literally exactly almost the same. But when we talk about school personnel, we're talking about superintendent's office, principals, assistant principals, teachers, everyone. You know. So that there, by including the board in that conversation, creates a district code of conduct where everyone is on the same page. A piece that we added that we felt was very important, because this is important to today's environment, are publications. There's something that everyone has to understand, is that, you know, social media can be considered a publication. And what we mean by such is that if someone has their own personal Facebook page or Instagram page, and they're belittling or berating someone from the school or school district, personnel, staff, or student, that has implications. That has to be known. Too often what happens is there's conversations, well, that was my child's personal page. Or an employee, well, that's my personal Facebook page. What has to be understood is that there are school-sponsored publications, non-school sponsored publications, social media, off-campus conduct, and and social media conduct. They all fall into the same realm if it impacts the safety and well-being of anyone in the school district, student
Like
or staff.
cyberbullying.
Cyberbullying, yes, it's all part of it. And this is something that's been updated in many school districts' code of conduct, because it is a reality of what we face. Additionally, what's important is, what is school-sponsored versus non-school-sponsored publication? Well, you know, when we're going to be expanding, for example, our Riverside, you know, news and our Crestwood news and different things like that. So that's school-sponsored. But there's also non-school sponsored. And what that could be is, someone could be part of an organization that is a student or staff member of our district, and they're part of a non-school sponsored publication. If that non-school sponsored publication does not negatively impact the school district, well, then it's not an issue. But again, it comes back to the same thing with social media. If someone is making threats and or belittling or someone within the school district, then the conversation can be had from there. Off-campus contact is very important. We also added this piece because we have to have everyone understand that their actions off campus could impact what happens on campus. You know, a lot of times if something happens off campus, it can, lean into or create a problem when students come back to school. If you all remember, last year, prior to the pandemic, we had a couple situations where it was off campus. Well, I worked with Mr. Fabris on those situations, but now we're putting it part of the student code of conduct. Oh, sorry. Okay.
Fix my glasses, sorry.
No worries. I just don't want to miss anyone.
I'm sorry, on that note,
Yeah,
off-campus, school-sponsored and non-school sponsored.
correct, of course, yes. Student dress code. This is something that was not in the student code of conduct. So we added it. Again, this is reviewing other districts around us. I mean, there's no reason to recreate the wheel. We look at what they have. And actually, when we looked at what they had, we looked at their most recent version. So if they had a version that was written adopted in 2012, but as long as it was adopted within the last 3 to 5 years, we looked at it. So with this student dress code, honestly, what it comes down, and this is for men and women. This is not just for ladies. And this is also, again, we got to change student dress code, and I apologize. I just noticed I didn't change it yet. It has to be just dress code because it also impacts staff. And the idea behind it is that we don't want to take away from the sanctity of learning. So, there are certain things that students should or should not be doing. There is a piece on here that we've added. It's the second to last bullet. Head coverings not allowed in classrooms or hallways during instructional time unless for medical or religious purposes. Purpose behind that is for safety. Okay? When we have students who are in the building and or adults in the building that have hats on, they can cover their identity with those hats. We can't see who they are. And I will tell you, as a former high school principal of 2,700 students, believe it or not, when someone was walking the hallway that didn't fit, we knew. Why? Because we could see them. You can tell. And it's for safety reasons. So we're going to be pushing that issue of students putting their hats away, when they're in school. It's for safety,
Does
nothing
that
but that.
include hoods?
Hoods too, everything, anything
Should
that's
that
covered.
be in there listed to
Oh,
make them understand?
Well, that's why we just said head coverings.
Okay.
You know, anything that covers the head.
Okay.
You know, bandanas, anything, as long as if it's a religious or medical need, of course, you know. And the medical need, students would just have to provide medical documentation.
Baseball caps?
No, they, unless, the only time we would probably approve that is like when our baseball team wears their uniform before a game, because that's school sponsored. You know, so if it's a school sponsored event, and usually if they're wearing their hat, they got their jersey on with their number, so we know who they are, you know. Unless if it's the younger brother or older brother that put on their stuff and came into school, but we don't think that would happen. The key thing here is building administration has the right to request anyone who is not following these guidelines to address it. If they refuse to address it, they can be sent home. Or we will have some extra clothing in offices that they can put on. Now, can't guarantee you how nice it'll look. Can't guarantee you if it won't smell like a smelly locker, but there'll be some things in there, you know. And if parents want to come up and help them, you know, bring them a new set of clothes, that's fine. We have to do this. This is for the safety of all the students. And this is for men and women. This isn't just, you know, one way. Like, our guys should not be wearing weightlifter tank tops. You know, that's against the dress code. Okay? And I'll be honest with you, whenever I see any of our athletes running around with their shirt off, I yell at them, say, put your shirt on, even when it's 100 degrees outside. Like, it's too hot. Like, I don't care. Put your shirt on. You know, and what it is, it's to represent our district. Controlled substances, that stayed, and there was no changes there, but what I will say to you is that with the controlled substances, as we get further down, and I get into classifications, I'll go into a little bit more detail on classifications of breaking certain conduct. Student searches and questioning, this was something that was specifically, Gary and her team helped me with this one specifically because I had some concerns with the original language. By the way, anything you see that's crossed out was the original language, so that you know that what was there and what was removed, so it just didn't disappear. So I forgot to preface by saying that anything you see crossed out was from the original language, okay? So Gary and her team came back and said, you should take that whole thing out. And this is actually written by her team. So this fits directly into policy and law when it comes to searches and seizures, as well as student questioning, because that's a very, very sticky topic. Basically, what our purpose is if somebody from the outside comes in to question our students, they have to follow a protocol. And we as a school district are not part of that questioning system. And moreover, we can search anything that is our property. So if it's our lockers, desks, gym, it's our property, we can search it. If there's a gym bag that nobody is claiming and it's just laying in the hallway, that becomes like our property. We can search it. What our recommendation to our principals, and I've already spoken to the principals about this, is if you have a student of whom you have knowledge of and or concerns that the student has a weapon and or illegal substances on him or her, you contact the school resource officer plus 2 other administrators or an administrator and a staff member, and you ask that student to either empty their pockets or their gym bag. And they have them empty it in front of you. You don't empty it for them, they empty it. If they choose not to empty it, then you contact their parents and tell their parents they gotta come up here and they have to empty it for them. And if their parents choose not to, then you can keep that student in there until the parents come. Reason for that is we don't want to search the students. But if we have a reasonable concern that the student has a weapon and or some type of paraphernalia he or she should not have on their property, we have to have options to secure the safety of our students.
So you'll never physically touch them, the
Correct.
parent or somebody else?
Nope, we will never physically search students. That is not going to be our role.
Okay.
Prohibited student conduct. This was all added. So as you can see here, I'm not sure what color you can see. For me, it's green. It might be a different color for you. These were all added. And what we did here was, with the previous, if you go further, like if you jump all the way to page 23, and you go from page 23 all the way, we deleted all of that, and everything prior to page 23 replaced it. Because what was happening was, we're a restorative practices district. We're an alternative means to suspension district. Yes, there are certain levels that lead to an automatic suspension. Okay, that's fighting, paraphernalia, there's different things. Whenever there's direct student, whenever there's a direct student threat, that's gonna lead to a suspension. Now, one thing I wanna make clear is, let's say, God forbid, there's a fight between students. Those students may be sent home, their parents are told, listen, your child and another child were in an altercation, we're gonna send them home while we investigate what happened. And after we conclude our investigation, we will contact you and let you know what's going on. The reason for that is this. First and foremost, the students were both involved in the conflict. The students they'll have their due process. They'll have their opportunity to give their sides of their story. Instead of having those two students sit in the office the entire day while administrators do an investigation and possibly lead to other conflicts, we send them home while the investigation is taking place. This doesn't only protect the two students, but also protects other students who may be in fear because of retaliation. One thing that you will see in this district code of conduct, any student involved in retaliation, no matter if it's verbal or physical, will receive the same consequences those that were the individuals involved in breaking any of the code of conduct. Part of our, and it's further down, I'm just skimming through this real quick. We have a focus on, our focus is not on bullying. Our focus is on resiliency. And our purpose is that we want to teach students how to be resilient. They're going to come across bullies in their entire life. Bullying is a term that has a very general description, very general definition. What one person may consider bullying, another person may not. So what has to happen here is, if someone is being bullied, we have to teach both the person that feels they're being bullied as well as the person that is committing the bullying what is right and what is wrong and how to handle it. By having a resilience program through restorative practices, we can sit individuals down and they understand how that made them feel. Moreover, it's not a quick jump, you were bullying, so you're suspended. Because again, it comes down to, are we teaching the lesson in the time that we need to teach it? And there's a lot of times that people, they hear bullying is this, harassment is this, so on and so forth, but they don't understand that they a lot of times don't see it when it's happening because they don't feel it. The other piece behind this too is this is adults as well. We always talk about bullying for children. This is for adults as well. It's the intimidation piece. It's the harassment piece. It's the, if you don't do it my way, or if you don't do it like this, or the fear piece. And we want to help everyone understand that this is not who we are as a district. Today, the team was on a call. We're currently getting ready to possibly bring in a strong marketing firm to market our district and to tell our story. And honestly, one of the staff members on there, I'm not going to say names, she I don't know if she saw it, but I took my glasses off because she put a tear in my eye. Because she told a story about a former student who is now an employee of the district, who sat in restorative practices circle, and she started crying because she said for the first time, our district is truly empathetic to the needs of our students. I'm not saying this because I'm your superintendent. I'm saying this because this is who we are. And this is what this district code of conduct is about. And it brings tears in my eyes right now because these are the kids that become adults that don't know how to defend or be themselves. And now she's a teacher in our district. Can't say more than that.
Question.
Yes, ma'am. Sorry.
Does
Madam
the
Smith.
board, I know in the past it was at different levels, but are you looking at the board being involved in level 5 or at any level?
Yes.
And then
Yes.
are there appeal processes for the students?
Yes, I love that. Great segue. Thank you, Trustee Fawaz. So let's jump down. So again, there's a lot here in green because this is all changed. And this was also by, this is to help us. So the first process is every student gets their due process. What due process means is every student gets an opportunity to tell their side of the story. That's why we're saying, if there has to be a sent home, maybe they're sent home for the day. And And then they come back the next day, and then there's a restorative practice circle. Sometimes they need a cooling off period, you know? And we say, you know what, you're going home today, cool off, tomorrow we're gonna bring the practice together. But I do want to mention that. So reinstatement procedure, reporting violations, so let's go through the level of violations. I don't want to spend too much time on each one because there's a lot there. But to reference your question, Trustee Fawaz, and to look at this as an overview, level 1 is anything that doesn't negatively impact another student's safety. All right, that's where alternative means to suspension come in. All right, level 1 discipline, you'll see here, suspension is not even listed in level 1 discipline. You'll see it's crossed out.
Can you tell us what page that is again?
Oh, my apologies. That is page 17 going on to 18.
I read it, I just didn't remember. the
No, that's
page.
okay. Thank you. Sorry if I go too fast. Please stop me and ask me those questions. Level 2 violations, any of the violations in level 1 that are constantly repeated, first and foremost. Like, we've done community service, we've exhausted all means. All right, you got to go home for a day or two. It's just what happens. But level 2, where there's an immediate suspension, is a violation of level 1, so it can repeat without resolution, but defined as a tier 2 discipline, which includes exhausting level 1 discipline, consequences cumulative in nature, violating the district code of contact for offenses that place the student or others in harm's way. That's where level 2 separates from level 1. That's fighting. That's bullying. That's harassment. You're putting another student directly in harm's way. Level 3, level 1, level 2 repeated. But then level 3, if you notice the difference here, it's still putting other students in harm's way, but possession of inappropriate personal property, weapons or items considered a weapon. Arson, false fire alarm, interference with school authorities. This is a level 3. This leads to suspension. Level 4 is everything in levels 1, 2, and 3, but also deals with threats, gang activity, and habitual offenders. Now, when does it come to the board? Level 5. Now, last year, pre-pandemic, the board approved, if you jump to page 22, students' due process and appeal. Last year, prior to the pandemic, because we were dealing with some things, and I was looking at the expulsion process of the board, and the board agreed to change the expulsion process, where we added students' due process and appeal hearing. Building administrators can suspend up to 10 days when it comes to consecutive, without it coming to the superintendent's office or the board. By following these levels, you're not going to get a 10-day right off the bat. There's a process to get to 10 days. Unless if you do something, for example, like start a fire, or you're in a gang activity. I mean, that's when you get into that level 4, level 5, or you bring narcotics to school. Now, with our student services department, what we have is the due process and appeal, which basically means if a building administrator, and a building administrator can do this at any time. Building administrator can do this at a 3-day suspension if they want to get student services involved. Basically, if a building administrator feels they're going to suspend a student for 11 or more days, they can put in a recommendation for suspension or expulsion and how many days. They can put the recommendation. The recommendation goes through this hearing process. That hearing process is going to be Mr. Radwan Awada, Mr. Ayman Al-Sirsi, and my apologies, and possibly Mr. Rashid Beydoun. It matters the situation of where we're at with restorative practices. And what happens is, and the building administration. What happens is they follow this process. The student, the building administration explains, this is very strict, it's a very strict time limit. 7 to 10 minutes to explain the situations, why they're making the recommendation. The student and family give their reflection. Here it says HR and student services, or their designee, which are those that I had mentioned, would be Dr. Lazar's designee. Would ask for additional questions, reference the case, draw some more information. Parents then will have an opportunity to ask more questions. From that point, Mr. Awada will then make a recommendation to Dr. Lazar on what the consequence should be, based on his investigation. If Mr. Awada says, you know what, we gotta take this to the board for expulsion, this is, then it would come to the board for expulsion. And then that expulsion process is explained in here as well. If Mr. Awada comes back and says, all right, this young man or this young woman has already served 3-4 days of suspension, I recommend they come back tomorrow. Or I recommend they get 10 days. Or I recommend they get 20 days. It would go to Dr. Lazar. Dr. Lazar would bring it to me for final approval. I'd have to look over everything. Anytime a student is gonna have 11 or more days suspended, the board will be made aware. You will be made aware so that you know what is happening. So if anybody calls you, you'll have the information. With the expulsion process, the board is the only entity that can expel or not expel a student, not the superintendent. If it's an expulsion, then I, Dr. Lazar, Mr. Awada would go to Dr. Lazar would come to me. If I agreed that it should be expulsion, I then would come to the board, and I would say to the board, here's the situation we're in, we need to have an expulsion hearing. The process is explained there, where you would get all the documentation beforehand so you can review it and have your questions ready, so that when the family comes in, you can ask the family the questions, and of course, the family has the right to either a closed session or open session. We would offer them that right.
If you don't mind me asking, so these levels, the definitive bullet points on each level, are those things that you decided to drop into those levels, or is that pretty consistent with?
It's pretty consistent. It's very consistent with other districts that are following restorative practices.
So when we're talking about the term weapons or items considered a weapon, should that not be more definitive? Because that sounds like a level 4 to me, depending on the weapon.
So I have that in which level? My apologies.
Level 3.
I have it level 3. So again, the thing with level 3 is a suspension. One of the first consequences is suspension on level 3. The reason why weapons is in level 3 is because if a student, state law, if a student brings a knife to school a certain size, it's an automatic expulsion. But there are situations where a student may use a chair as a weapon.
That's why I asked the definition of a weapon.
And we can clarify that more in the.
Well, I mean, listen, kids make mistakes. We all know that,
course.
and we're not looking to fry their whole lives for this. But at the end of the day, the kids that are around them too have the same right to safety.
Yes.
And I guess the next question I would have for you is around, gang activity. I know that there's a suspension, and that's directly from a level 4 to a level 5 to come back.
Well, so in a level 4 infraction, it's suspension. The one thing about this, if you notice, there's no set number of days for how long the students are suspended. That is the building administrator's discretion. So what happens is, if a building administrator, if it's the first time a student had this offense, or a student got caught up in the wrong group, that's gonna, that could be 1, 2, 3, 4 days suspension. But if this is a habitual offender, where this student has been spoken to multiple times, and there is documentation showing that we were trying to support this student, and this administrator says, you know what, I would like to recommend 30 days, then they would submit the due process, and then they would go through due process.
If we're getting to 30 days, you've pretty much shot the child's entire school year.
Well, but under the law, they would still get education. They would still be able to learn.
Sure, so virtual or
It would be
instructive.
virtual, yes.
But I guess the reason I'm asking you is if you understand, and I go back to the weapon, and I'm sure hopefully you can define that a little more.
We can.
And then I hear gang activity.
Yeah.
And that's the one thing no parent wants to hear about in their school. So
Yeah, I understand.
So for me to hear that a potential gang activity a child caught up in gang activity is only going to get 30 days, then we got a root problem. So that's the only thing I'm like, my mind is trying to process with
No.
level 4, level 5. So.
Understood. And when you look at it, it says level 4 exam says possible outcomes up to 30 days for suspension. Return to days served, contract upon return, refer to Board of Education for expulsion. So all those options are there, so that the students and the parents know that you could go from a 1-day suspension to an expulsion.
Sure.
Based on the event. And when we say gang activity, what we have to understand is, I know a lot of times when people think of gangs, they think of the Crips and the Bloods and all that good stuff. What it more is it's like cliques. You got a group of 4 or 5 boys or 4 or 5 girls that target one student.
Yeah.
That's technically considered gang activity.
I'm talking about street
Yeah.
gang
Yeah.
activity, not bully gang.
Yeah. No, we're talking about in school gang activity where people gang up on one student.
So my next question to you is, if there is a child that's caught with a weapon, whatever it may be, or a child that's deemed a part of gang activity, and the school administrator, handles the process as they see fit, they don't have to notify you. Is that what you said earlier?
Only if they're requesting 11 or more days suspension.
Okay. Then shouldn't the board be notified when you are notified?
Yes, of course.
Okay.
That's why anything that will be over 11 or more days, it will be in a memorandum to the board with information on why it's occurring so that you're aware.
I would just ask, anything with the term gang activity associated with it, regardless of the number of days?
Understood. Yeah.
We all have children,
Yeah.
and none of us want to see that. We all have 4,200 children here, so
Yeah.
none of us want to see that in the school system.
No,
And I will tell you
I
that
understand.
none of us are going to tolerate that, so. That's the reason I'm pushing it.
I don't
It's hard for me to wrap my mind around the word.
and I don't disagree with you.
Okay.
What we tried to do with this district code of conduct is not make it too specific. Because of the situation of a young man or young woman just made a bad decision, got
Sure.
caught up with the wrong group. Everything you'll see that's crossed out did do that.
Okay.
And it literally was, if you do this, you get this. If you do this, you get this.
Yeah, that's not fair.
And that defeats our entire philosophy of empathy and restorative practices.
Dr.
Yes.
Najat?
I guess I was gonna say my concern more so than even the word gang would be the weapon, but then I guess depending on the weapon, would that automatically mean that it comes to the board anyways, or not even? 'Cause I think it's
So-
more the weapon that I fear.
The thing is, because when we say weapon, a book can be used as a weapon.
Right.
So if a kid grabs a book and hits another kid over the head, that's gonna be considered a weapon.
Obviously,
Yeah, so that could be,
Not-
but
yeah.
it could, but you have to also keep this in mind too. And it's in here, there's a statement in here, if you look close enough it is, and I'm not asking Andrew here to come up and say anything, but she can nod her head in agreement. She's over there in the audience. Students with special needs, we always have to do an MDR. We have to make sure it's not a manifestation of their disability.
right.
Because if it's a manifestation of the disability, then we have to go a whole completely different route.
Sure.
And there's a statement in the district, in this district code of conduct that mentions that. So that's just, so I understand, I agree with the both of you. I don't disagree, and we can look at that language and maybe change it up a bit. But again, it's to create a general understanding, but giving the building administrators the flexibility
Right.
to work with each individual student on an individual basis.
Right, I guess I think like with what Mo was saying in regards to the safety of the other students, when it comes to a weapon that could potentially really harm them.
They would be going to 11 or more days. I will tell you that
We
right
would
now.
automatically be notified.
They- no.
But I guess he's like,
You're a lot nicer than I am. If
like-
it's a weapon that's going to hurt multiple children, I mean.
Well,
that's
so,
just, yeah.
but then it changes the definition, my
Yeah, okay.
apologies. It changes the definition, because that's why we just use weapon.
Yeah.
Because let's move it from, okay, you got a book, I hit a kid over the head with a book.
Right.
But God forbid, somebody brings in a gun or a knife,
Yeah.
okay, or a switchblade. The whole dynamic of the investigation changes. That is an automatic 11 days or expulsion.
Which is why I wanted the definition of weapon.
Yeah, so,
And I don't know,
Yeah.
I'll refer to.
and actually, I'll talk to Gary later, because before we finalize any of this, of course, I'm gonna go with through Gary on all this with her team, and if we can define it indifferently, we will.
Thank you.
Nadia?
Did you ask a question?
I was just gonna say the gun and the knife, and I think
Yeah.
the knives have to be a 3.5-inch blade.
It's 3.5 inches or more.
Yeah.
It's
And
it's,
that's automatic then,
it's
and
state law.
That's state law.
But-
State
We don't
law.
want knives, period, in the school.
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
Right.
Even if it's a half inch, right?
Yeah, no, I agree 100%. So, and I mean, I'll say this publicly, and I don't mind. I mean, I've dealt with situations, a young lady, and this was an elementary school young lady, this was when I was an elementary school principal, brought a knife to school, a steak knife. Teacher saw it, sent her down to me. I said, "Sweetie, why you have this?" "Oh, because it hurts my teeth when I bite into my apple."
Oh, okay.
Okay, so that's what I'm saying. So I called mom and dad. Mom and dad, they were freaking out. And I'm like, "Listen, it's okay. Can't bring this." And they're like, "Oh, okay." And it worked out. It was fine.
And I think that's the key.
Yeah.
Is every situation is different,
Exactly.
and, you know,
Let's leave the knife in the kitchen for the staff to cut it for you. Yeah, it's okay, all right.
Exactly, I'm sorry.
That's all right.
That was it, I just wanted to make sure that.
Yeah.
That was
what I wanted to.
Okay, Salvo?
Thank you.
Presumably, and I'm just assuming, but I'm thinking this is the case. In the appeal process, if the student has already served, say, 3 or 4 days, and now the investigation's going on, or they're in their appealing process, if the outcome is different than what was recommended, or they weren't getting 5 days, for example, or 6 days, that all gets taken off their record, everything gets
Yes.
corrected?
Yes, 100%. So I'd like to add to that if I may, because that's a very good point again, Trustee Fawaz. What I'd like to add to that is this. One thing that I tell all school administrators, you can never go up in suspension, you can only come down. So if that's why we say, if we send a child home while we're investigating, it's better to say, your son or daughter is suspended for 5 days. Oh, we did the investigation, we gotta add 5 more, or they're going to a hearing. I will tell you, if it comes to me, that's an issue. But if you tell a parent, right now, he or she's looking at 5 days, but I gotta finish my investigation, and you come back to the parent and say, okay, Yusuf was out today, Yusuf has to be out tomorrow, Yusuf can come back on Wednesday, but he's gotta go to restorative practice circle, and he's gotta sign a contract. That's due process. It's giving the family and the students an opportunity. And then, if a parent is not happy with a building administrator's decision, they would go to Mr. Radwanawada. He would look at it. If they're still not happy with his decision, they would go to Dr. Lazar. If they're still not happy with Dr. Lazar's decision, they would come to me. If they're still not happy with my decision, they would come to you. But if it got to that point, you would have all the information prior to them coming to you. Process. So, reinstatement process, it's very simple. So I'm going to jump down real quick. So again, now I'm going past all the stuff we blocked, we crossed out. Just so the board's aware, page 28, previous misconduct in another educational institution. Please note, we will not accept students who were expelled from another educational institution. And we can request deportment records, and if they were on suspension, we have to accept them. But what our building administration can do with our restorative team and our school resource team is meet with that child to say, okay, you're coming to us from this school. We see this is your deportment record. We would meet with mom and dad too, of course. I mean, this would be a family conversation. And we're hoping that here at Crestwood Schools, we won't have these issues anymore, but please note, these issues are here, and we want you to be aware that we're here to help you. So there'll be a preliminary conversation. And again, it's through empathy, because we never know the situation that child was in the other school district. We never know, but expulsions, we will not take it. And so I see more stuff crossed out, a lot of stuff crossed out. Again, everything we just talked about is all that stuff crossed out, but cleaned up. Students with disabilities, here you go. Page 36 talks about manifestation of a disability. And that's where Andrew, now if it's a student with disability, right when Mr. Awada gets hold of it, he brings Mrs. O'Hare into it and her team to make sure that all special ed needs are taken care of. Moreover, building administration would go directly to the student's resource teacher and have that resource teacher part of the conversation to see if it's a manifestation. If I may, manifestation means that due to the child's disability is why they committed the act. So for example, if a child has learning disability and comes and punches Yusuf in the face because Yusuf said something to him, that is not a manifestation. If the child is emotionally impaired and cannot handle, that type of stress and punches Yusuf in the face, the team could determine it's a manifestation. It doesn't mean that there's not consequences. There are consequences, but it's different in terms of how we handle the process. And note that, our students that have disabilities, when they're suspended, that data is input to the state, and that's one of the things that Mrs. O'Hare, in her short time as director, was able to clean up, was all of the suspensions of students that had disabilities from the past. Yes.
I'm
I'm sorry,
So-
President
No,
Garcia, I just keep doing
So someone with a disability, whatever the case may be, or maybe emotional, like you're saying. They physically get into an altercation with a student that is not of special needs and either hurt them or, cause damage. How would you handle, I know the discipline's gonna be different because of their situation, but what if, at that point, like, what would you do if that kid now fears coming to school because, this person's there and they might do this to me again, or, I guess, how would you handle that?
That's a great question, again, because that is probably one of the most difficult things I had to deal with as a building administrator.
Because now they're not gonna feel safe, right?
Exactly. It's like, I can't have the conversation, with, Mrs. Alzaya, that the child that came after her child has a disability. I can't say that. Because Mrs. Alzayat's gonna be like, well, why is that kid back in school? I can't say why. But what I will say is this. Last year.
She's gonna be going crazy.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
So last year, we had a situation where there was a manifestation, and Andrew O'Hare did a phenomenal job with the team. And what they did is they created a plan for the student with the manifestation and the student that was impacted. And what that plan was the student with the manifestation had to have an escort anywhere that student went. That student was never allowed to be on their own in the hallways. That student had to be, put in situations where they were not going to ever put the other student in fear. And the other student that was in fear received additional supports, social work help, school psychology help, not for their mental well-being, which it helped, but also for them emotionally to feel safe. They were given an alternate plan, and we changed, teachers for the students so that they weren't in the same class and or in the same lunch so we look at all of those. That's what we can do. That's where you create a plan to put the student with the disability in a safe environment, as well as putting the student who received the negative aspect of that in a safe environment. And
But you're displacing the victim in times when you do that.
well, where it works is usually what happens is the problem we have is if a student with a disability has to be in certain classes, we can't move that student out of that class. But we have the conversation with the family. This isn't something that happens in a corner. This is both families come in separately with the team, and both families are updated on what we're doing. We know that there's going to still be people that are upset. We understand that. I'm not going to tell you this is a perfect system. But what this system does do is it protects everyone. And it is difficult. I to this day, still remember having long conversations with parents because their child was involved in an altercation, and their child, was afraid. And I understood. I have full confidence in the special ed team at Crestwood, Riverside, and the elementary schools right now. Mrs. O'Hare has done a phenomenal job moving people around and putting people in spots where they're strong. And with the building administration, we're going to have, these situations are going to happen. God willing, they happen far and few in between. But we're ready now to handle those situations because we have a procedure in place.
Thank you.
You're very welcome. So moving forward, you'll see there's going to be a signature sheet on page 38. Parent and student have to sign it. We're going to have a process where they're going to submit it. We also have the cell phone policy. Basically, what the cell phone policy basically says is the building administration has the authority to confiscate and pick up cell phones when they're a disturbance to learning. Okay? We understand, and I want to be clear, cell phones today have become more of a need than a want. We understand that. Try finding a payphone today. Okay? Parents are working. Sometimes it's hard to get down to the office to make a call. But we don't want cell phones interrupting instruction. And that's really where our focus is. And we don't want cell phones being used to videotape a teacher. We don't want cell phones being used to videotape an altercation. I will be clear with you, and it says it in here. Any student that is videotaping or taking screenshots or shots of an incident and shares that incident will be treated as the perpetrator of the incident. They will not be treated as a bystander.
So,
Yes.
Yes, go ahead, Mo.
I don't know, I've heard this somewhere, and I don't know if this is pretty common practice, but some schools don't allow the children to take the phones out of the locker, or they can, between breaks, they can get to their phone, and not allow them in the classrooms. I don't know if that's something you've considered, but
The problem is a lot of our students don't use their lockers. It's easier to put their stuff in their backpacks and travel. So they
They
leave
will
their
if
phone.
you do that.
What's that?
They will if you do that.
Yeah, that's maybe.
They won't miss out on any 5-minute break you get there. will they?
That's a good point. That's a good point. The other piece too, though, is we're trying to enhance our technology use in the classroom. There are many apps that teachers can use that the kids can use their cell phones with.
Tablets. The
The Chromebook can work, but the cell phone works even quicker sometimes. So, you know, my personal philosophy on cell phones is that for every one we confiscate, the child has 2 more somewhere else. That's been my experience. So our whole thing is building administrators, and I have a lot of faith in our current building administrators. If they make it a clear understanding that, look, you're interrupting instruction and that's the problem, it helps. But if you become the cell phone police, you're literally asking for problems. As a building principal, my philosophy was very simple. Cell phone usage during instruction time is insubordination.
Right.
It's that simple. I, as a building principal, did not have a cell phone policy. It just was, you can't interrupt learning.
Yep.
Therefore, it's insubordination. But the teachers, as well as others in our district, wanted to have something, and I'm fine with that too. So what we have here will work, but I wanted, everyone to understand that we don't want it to take all our time. But the big thing I'd like everyone to understand, and everyone's gonna know this, you will not be considered a bystander if you sit and screenshot or video an incident. You either go get an adult to stop it, and if you don't, and you choose to become Instagram famous or TikTok famous or Twitter famous because of that, you'll become famous in my office. I'm being honest.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, Michelle?
The policy is different for the middle school than the high school though, isn't it?
It is, yes.
Okay, so
Is
the
there a
middle
separate
s-
one on here?
Yes, that's what I saw, sorry.
No,
The
you're
mi-
fine.
The middle school, I thought they can't, it has to be in their locker.
I have to double check. I'm glad you brought that to my
That's what I
attention.
read.
Is it in here?
It is. It
That
says
was-
middle school
yeah.
and then it says high school.
Okay.
So
Okay.
K,
So
I think you
it was
have on there
harder-
K through
It was
8.
harder to monitor in
and
the
then
high
9
school.
through 12.
But the middle school, we said before,
Yeah.
no,
Yeah, also though,
Yeah.
in regards to the middle school though, there was a lot of discussion, and I believe that was what Donna, because there were teachers that were requesting that those middle school students bring them as part of their use in that class, as part of their,
I think it was 3
thought
years
that's
ago
what
Yeah,
where we
3.
passed that
Yeah.
with the middle
well,
school.
yeah, now they have Chromebooks, but again, it was,
Gotcha.
they were using them as though, as their computers.
and
Because if I remember correctly,
Well, no,
because if I remember correctly, the high school team wanted to update some things on theirs, but the middle school team was good with theirs, so I didn't even really look at the middle school.
and it might- and it still may be that way,
so,
so.
and I'm sorry, because I had my packet from when
I know.
I was at the meeting, but then I thought I had another one in here, but I did not have one in mine, so I don't have it in front
It's
of me.
okay. I'm looking right now.
No, it was in here. There were 2 different,
So middle school, high school.
Linda, can you write that down and double check that? And I will double check that. Thank you for bringing that to my
So
attention.
should it be the same? And then as long as they're not disrupting, they can have it in their possession?
So this was something that came from the teachers, and they were comfortable with what they, and if they were comfortable with that, and building administration is comfortable with that, I just left it be. So as we move forward, page 42.
I'm sorry.
it's right here, page 39.
Page 39.
Students in grade P8 are not permitted to carry cell phones in any time during the school day.
Yes, here it
Yeah.
is. Yeah, and as you can see, nothing's crossed out here,
Yeah,
so we
'cause
left it all alone.
We had just said that the high school is a little bit, they're gonna use their phones more often, and as long as they didn't have them out during passing, they were okay, but in the classroom, so long as the teachers permitted, they were fine, they could use them. But that the
Yeah, so
middle
here
school,
was the
in
discussion.
elementary, middle school, they weren't allowed to have them out.
Yeah, as you see, nothing's crossed out here, so I
So you're
didn't.
gonna leave it like that?
Well, the teachers were good with it, everybody was good with it, so I left it alone.
So it's contradictory.
I gotta be
So the
honest,
teachers won't
Mr.
ask,
Chair.
No, go
I
ahead.
just,
Just one second.
was I called on or no?
Well, I let you speak, so, but go ahead and finish your question.
No, because I said Mr. Chair and then,
Oh,
Oh,
I didn't hear you.
No, but go ahead, finish your question.
okay. So I just, before you move on, I think, like you said, this was still in draft form. I think you guys, or all of us, should reconsider this,
Well-
just from a safety perspective. I've been involved in a lot of like active shooter trainings for schools. You know, they don't even call it that anymore. They call it, you know, incident, action incident, you know, training and stuff. I don't think there's anything wrong with any kid having a cell phone on them for safety purposes, 'cause, as long as it doesn't interrupt instruction. So if it interrupts instruction, that's easy, right? So the
Yeah.
teacher knows that instruction has been interrupted, they, you know, confiscate the phone, whatever those processes are. And then if it doesn't, I don't think it's a big deal if the kids get to keep their phones on them.
Mr. Chair.
That's just, you know, a statement I wanted to make. I think if you guys go back and maybe reconsider it, or even let us know what the committee thinks are the pros and cons.
Okay.
Because they might know more than me. I'm obviously not in the classroom dealing with 30 kids who have a phone.
Got it.
So,
Okay, thank you. It's gonna go here, and then I saw Najah. Did you have a question as
No,
well?
I'm good.
Okay, and just to reiterate what Danielle just said, that was to some discussion.
It
Was
was.
that, not necessarily, the safety was part of it, but was that the fact that in the junior high school, there were many of staff members in the 7th and 8th grade, nothing that I remember in
I thought it was
the
the high
lower
school.
levels. No, but that they'd like to have the students, and this is pre-Chromes,
Yeah.
that the students would have those phones, that they could use them as part
It
of
was
the lesson.
opposite of that.
That's why, yeah, I'll let Betty
If
talk.
I may.
Yeah, but this goes back a few years, so.
We just talked about
No.
that.
So
Was
something
it?
to
Okay.
revisit,
I
I
was-
think.
Okay, well, it can be revisited. Go ahead, I'm sorry, go ahead, Nat.
I was on that committee when the discussion was had, and the majority of the issues were caused in
By?
7th and 8th.
Okay.
They were doing the recording, Instagram was very popular, all those social medias, and the teachers did have a
Upset
concern
about
about
that.
that. So
Okay.
I would like the feedback from the staff, since they are the ones that have to deal with it, the disruptions and so on, and then to go from there.
Okay.
yeah, is
Same
that,
question.
that's gonna be part of the pros and cons?
Yeah,
What they-
I can bring the teacher group back and ask them these questions.
Okay, I think it's a good idea.
Najah, was yours in the same?
Well, it was kind of the same, because I think the thing was the staff at the high school really wasn't on board with having to police the cell phones, but the middle school was really fed up with like the cell phone activity.
Right.
Okay.
But you went over it with the committee that you had already, or that section wasn't gone over?
No, they got a copy of they, just
And
as
they
I did
went
with the
over it,
board, they had an
okay.
opportunity to review it themselves. And then we scheduled a meeting and we went through the whole thing, so.
Okay.
So I can bring this specific piece back and have that conversation again.
And,
Thanks.
and maybe from what I'm remembering is I'm reading it here, you know, in regards to the P8, but then the third paragraph says cell phones and other devices only at the discretion of the teacher. So maybe that's what I'm
Yeah.
recalling.
It was
So,
very disruptive
yeah.
at the middle school.
So, and that's probably what I'm recalling, but anyways,
Well,
okay,
Mr.
thank
Chair,
you. Yes.
Think about the situations where we had the lockdown. I think we had one at Crestwood
High
before
school.
COVID.
Yep.
I don't remember if we had one at Riverside, but all the parents that maybe their kids didn't have access to their phones, just going crazy, wondering what was going on with their kids, you know, and I'm sure the administration was bombarded with calls. But just in that type of situation, just so you could call and say, hey, are you okay? You
Right.
know,
Well, Danielle brings up a good point, and this
Mine don't
goes
even
back
have some.
into the active shooter. I forgot the class that I took that I did my training through. And I remember that having cell phones was important so that the students in these classrooms could communicate back and forth to the outside sources and let them know we're fine, or whatever the case may be. So, but I believe it would be up to the administration to bring that information,
So-
pros and cons.
One of the problems is when we do have a lockdown, we don't tell the students why we're in lockdown.
Right.
Right, true.
So they don't even know why we're in lockdown, or we don't tell them for a reason, because there's an investigation going on.
Right.
But a message goes out to the
A
parents.
message goes out to the parents. Like when we had that lockdown at Crestwood, a message went out, and it said A, B, C, D, and E. It was very general, everybody's safe. And my personal opinion, I mean, again, if I was to make the decision on my own, I would say it's an act of insubordination. But again, I don't want to make that decision on my own, and I want to get the feedback from the teachers, because remember, I know this team was part of building this. We got this technically done, but it wasn't done, had a lot of holes in it still. So it's like trying to fix a house whose foundation is already crumbled, you know, but the teachers did a great job helping us out, they really did. So the last part, and then I'm done with, again, that's why I asked to go first, because I knew this would take a little while. The district attendance policy. This was something, now that we are moving to semesters, now that students, when they leave the school, they're not leaving the school because they got a hole in their schedule, they're leaving because they either have dual enrollment or they have a job. Attendance is going to be kept. Attendance is going, it was kept before, but there was no policy to hold the children accountable for being in school. So in short order, basically what this does, if you go to page 41, on page 41, you have a notification procedure. This is something new to the Code of Conduct. A student hits 5 absences, there's a letter sent home to parents via email. 8 absences, letter sent home to parents via email, regular postal mail, phone communication established by school. 10 absences, letter sent home to parents via email. 12 absences, letter sent home, so on and so forth. Once a student hits 12 absences, that student is technically put on what we call audit, which means that their course will not get full credit.
I'm sorry, once they hit what?
12 absences, the child will be put on audit, which means they will not get full credit for the course.
Is that unexcused?
That's unexcused, yes. If a child has doctor's appointments and stuff, and the parent calls it in, then that's, and what we ask, just for record keeping, and we're gonna be asking, and again, the building administrators are gonna be the ones, and their counselors are gonna be the ones responsible for this, is if a child has absences due to medical needs, let the school know in advance. And the counselor will put it on file. So therefore, that child will be protected. This is not to punish a child who needs to be out of school. This is not to punish anyone. This is to hold students accountable to attend when they're supposed to attend. Additionally, one of the responsibilities is students being in class on time. Hallways are supposed to be empty during instruction time. Yep. Therefore, every time a student tardies, if students have a student is tardy if he or she enters the classroom after the bell, 3 tardies, which is less than 10 minutes, will equate to 1 unexcused absence. A tardy of 10 minutes or more will be an unexcused absence. Now, the key thing to keep in mind here is there is an appeal process, and it's written in here. And how that appeal process works is very simple. The first step is that, hey, I'm coming from gym, and I gotta run all the way across to the other side of the school, and I can't get to class in time. Talk to your teacher about it. Say, hey, can you help me out with this? Teachers will listen, they'll understand. The other piece is things happen in children's lives. So if they have more than 12 absences, they can appeal that, and there is an appeal process, and there's an appeal team that reviews those appeals and makes a recommendation to the principal. The principal can, if the team doesn't agree, the principal can override. The only time the principal can't override is if the team doesn't want to give, if the team wants to give the student an excuse, the principal can't override. The other piece behind this is also that if a child scores 78% or better on their final exam, their audit is removed. Now I had it, some people said to me, well, that's not fair. What if they don't show up to my class ever and they get 70% or better on the final exam? I said, well, then you got to teach a little bit more rigor. I mean, the reality of it is, if you have a child who's not showing up to class but can still do well on your final exam, that child was bored.
Yeah. There's a
And that child wasn't where they needed to be. Right. So what's the point behind this? It's to hold students accountable to get to class on time and be in class, but not to go after them or punish them. And honestly, you know what percentage of students we're talking about here? Maybe 10%.
Yeah.
We're not talking about the vast majority of the students.
Nadia?
I guess my question was, we were in a hearing at one time and we couldn't make out the absences because they were marking them as hourly. So is this hourly or daily?
This is per class.
Per class.
This is per class. You could have 30 absences in first hour and no absences the rest of your day.
Right.
But with the formation and the procedure and the policies that we have now in place in the high school as well as the middle school, there's more to this. Once a student is flagged, there's somebody that jumps in and says, hey, what's going on? Why aren't you getting to school on time in the morning? I always feel bad, Joe Stickman, because you're like right here and I don't look at you. And if that's found out that this student is working you know, a 14-hour shift and is having a hard time waking up in the morning, well, we're gonna help that child out. We're still gonna hold that child accountable, but we're gonna help them out. With our new processes and procedures in our schools, we're gonna flag these students immediately. That's why we have these positions, and it's gonna help us.
One more question from Nadia.
Yes, so my question is, why do we want to wait till it's 5 absences to reach out to the families?
Because
Can't we do it at 3?
we also have to hold parents accountable for checking their child's attendance as well. We have
Okay.
to, because every child's attendance is gonna be on MyStar. And every parent has access to the parent portal. Every parent can check every day, and
Phone calls and texts.
and phone calls go out when a child misses class.
Right.
We have to understand, this district code of conduct is to hold the child accountable, but we gotta remember too, we gotta have, parents have to be somewhat accountable in this process as well.
Absolutely, but it goes back to maybe, sorry.
No, you're
Mr.
fine.
Chair.
Finish.
It goes back to maybe some parents are not tech savvy and don't know how to get onto technology or how to check their, I mean, I've known families that had that issue, so that's where it would be a concern to me.
Well, my thing with 5 absences is they still have time to correct, because you gotta get to 12.
It's right before the halfway mark.
Yeah, so it's even before the halfway.
Salwa?
Couple questions. Do they get phone calls? We don't get phone calls for tardies, right?
No, you only
Just
get phone calls
absences.
for absences.
And then, part two, to Nadia's point, I do recall what she's talking about. When, in some of these hearings, some of these people's records were just extreme as far as, absences. So when you have the, 3 over 10 minutes or 1 over 10 minutes and it equates to unexcused, if that person was to come before us, are we gonna be able to distinguish, was this a full day or was this a tardy that turned into an absence?
You'll be able to distinguish.
Okay.
It's because what it is in MyStar, and these are some of the changes that we've made. In MyStar, when you go in, it says absent, school-related, tardy, late.
Okay.
And the late is anything the 10 minutes or more. And it's clear on that. And again, we're hoping that if somebody, God forbid, comes in front of you, our goal is to bring nobody in front of you. I'm not gonna lie, that's our goal. We don't wanna we might update you on things and say, we got this, but we want you to know, but we don't wanna bring anybody in front of you. But if ever anyone had to come in front of you, I'm gonna tell you right now, I won't bring anyone in front of you if there haven't been multiple sets of interventions to help that child be successful. Because if there isn't, I'm not bringing that child in front of you.
Yeah,
I'm
in the
bringing that
past, it
child's
was
team in
just,
front of
it
me.
was a crazy amount
Yeah.
of unexcused absences and tardies that we were.
Yeah, that will, this first year is gonna be our first test in this process. It's gonna take time, but when people see that we're following through and there's people there to help them, I'll tell you, and you all know this. When you have somebody show up to your home and tell you, Mrs. Fawaz, we need to talk to you about, we need to help. You're gonna help, we weren't doing that in the past.
Right,
It was
right.
a clear system of, you broke, infraction, consequence, infraction, consequence, infraction, consequence. And then all of a sudden, I have an 8th grader standing in front of me that I gotta bring to the board. And that's unacceptable, and that will no longer happen.
With 40 absences.
So I'm just letting you know, you have my.
Right, and that's what I'm talking about.
And
right.
you have my
Yeah.
commitment that will no longer happen as a district.
It did.
So, is this the last of it?
That is, and I already talked about building resilience, and then the rest is just definitions, and that is a wrap.
Okay.
Okay, so before we go into that, I guess the big question for me is, how are we presenting this to students? Are we having a special orientation? Are we,
So once this district code of conduct is completed, this long form will be online. We will be creating a small 5x8 pamphlet that will have all the main details the kids need to know. That will be presented to the students, not in a whole assembly type of thing, but it'll be done in the classroom by teachers, by our team, so students understand this.
What about the parents?
Parents, we will also have parent nights where we bring them in and have these conversations. Now, if we have this done prior to orientation, then it'll be part of orientation.
Like a code of conduct book to pass out?
It'll be a pamphlet, and the whole document will be online for them to access. If they want us to print the whole document, it would be by request.
Yeah, I was just gonna ask you, can you just provide a way?
Yes.
They can request it if they can't print
Of
it?
course,
Well,
of
Is there
course.
any way to do it in a DocuSign type scenario where it can be
Yes.
electronic signatures and?
We can do that as well, yes, and that's actually something somebody else recommended. I just haven't, once we complete this, we're gonna look at that as well.
Thank
And
you.
if we can get it done before the orientations, then we'll have a special meeting at the schools in September, October, and to go over it. But no, this is definitely gonna be rolled out in a way where people can ask questions and so on and so forth. And maybe more than Mrs. Janoon and Mrs. Musa will show up. But yes, this is, and please note, this isn't written in stone. Whatever we adopt, whatever the board votes on to adopt, it's not written in stone. It will be evaluated every year. And we will make adjustments as need be.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Very good.
Thank you.
Very good. Thank you.
This has been a long time coming.
You
Yeah.
got 2 minutes, man.
Linda,
All right, so we have no other questions?
Yeah,
Everybody's
follow-up
satisfied? They'll get the information out? You're ready to roll this out as soon as possible, so
So
thank you.
I'm gonna reconvene a meeting with the teachers to look at the cell phone, get that finalized. Once I get that finalized, I'll clean up all my edits, and then we'll get it to an outside editor to edit, and then I'll ask Gary and her firm to look at it again, and then we'll bring it to the board for vote.
Perfect,
Thank
sounds
you.
good, thank you. All right. Let's move up to
If we could go to Dr. Lazar next.
Dr.
'cause it
Lazar.
Fits right into what we were
Okay,
discussing.
Dr. Lazar, HR
All right,
updates.
so Dr. Masalam already stole my thunder. But yes, the policy subcommittee had met earlier this year, and we did talk about reviewing and adopting a more updated policy for the district and the board. And Trustee Kaminsky is correct. We did start to meet last spring a few times virtually, and the conversation in those meetings as well did align with the conversation at the last policy subcommittee meeting, which is because it's been so long since the policy has been touched, it would be extremely overwhelming to try to go through the whole thing policy by policy on our own. And it would behoove the district to retain Troon. Penny corrects everybody on the pronunciation, so Troon, if you're out there, you have an advocate. But so they do have a policy package that the district can purchase. It's important that I highlight, again, the importance and the focus would be to ensure that our policies are both up to date and legally viable, because since 2005, there have been some changes in some of the legal aspects. And I did want to reiterate that although it's a pre-purchased policy from beginning to end, that the district policy committee and board can work in order to review and customize any of those policies prior to adoption. And so that is my spiel in a nutshell on a time frame.
All right, sounds good, thank you, thank you.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
Just to reiterate, I know we talked about this before, but just in going forward with all the subcommittees, if we could get the meeting notes sent to all of us from the meet?
Yeah.
Thank you.
And Mrs. Morgan.
And how much time do I have? No.
30 seconds.
30 seconds, no, go ahead.
I have a couple things. First of all, I wanted to talk about the Transformer, I feel like a movie, but anyway, Transformer RFB. On June 18th, we had posted the RFB to the third-party website, plus our website as well. We scheduled on July 8th a walkthrough for any potential companies to come in and look at the transformer. The reason I'm doing this is we received one bid, and I know in the past we've talked about going out to bid again for the one bid. On July 8th, there was one company that contacted us about the walkthrough. They followed all the guidelines, met all the deadlines. My concern with going out to bid again is the time frame with the transformer. This is a critical situation depending on when the transformer goes. It may not get here in time and we could be without power. So putting out a bid again would take another 6 weeks to do all of that. And this company followed all the timelines, all of the guidelines that we set. They'd never stepped foot on our property prior to this bid, so I didn't even know the company existed until this bid. They did call and ask questions and ask for information for it. So I'm just asking the board, before Dr. Masalam approves the purchase and moves forward with it, does the board want us to go out to bid again, or can we move forward with this individual company?
Okay, I'm thinking, but I'm going to allow members here to voice. So, Najah?
My question is, how critical is it? And if it's really that critical, did we have to go out? for
We did
bid?
have to go out to bid because of the fact that it was not an emergency, because it was still operational. But at any time, this is one of the reasons why, when we lost power on June 15th, one of the reasons why it took so long to get back up, because the transformer is probably 35 to 40 years old.
So, in all reality, I mean, wouldn't it be that could we bypass
So-
going through that? Because it really is, sorry,
I know.
and with everything that's happening with the weather, I'd almost feel like,
But we did go through the bid process. We do have a
Right.
viable bid.
Right.
To bypass it, the state would look frowningly against it because of the fact that it's not an emergency. It is operational at the time. And it could last another year, it could last 2 months. We don't know the length that it will last.
Right.
If I may add, Mr. President.
Yes.
Just to add what Mrs. Morgan stated,
Yeah.
the definition of critical need is critical right now. And I don't want us to get into a situation as a public entity where we go
course.
forward and then they come back to us and say, well, this wasn't a critical need, it was working.
Of course,
That's,
but because it was down
I don't disagree.
when all
Yeah.
of that happened, I hate to only have one bid, but I also understand with the process that it does put us behind as well, and I'm not crazy about only having one bid either, so.
I have two ahead of you. I'm
I
sorry.
was just going to say, because of what happened with that flood and getting back up, I think this is something that makes it critical needs. Has this company worked with any other school district that we could possibly just check and say, hey, were they okay?
I can check their references. They did include references before processing and doing all of that. I didn't want to go through all of that to go through and check the references, because if we were going to put it back out to bid, then I didn't want to do that. But I can check the references, because they did have it listed in the document.
Because I feel like after seeing everything that we went through, I don't want to be in that situation again. And I don't think any of us anticipated June 15th, nor how long it took. And we might not have had the damage that we sustained to the buildings had the power been able to come back up sooner, right?
No, that had nothing to do with the flood. That was prior to the flood. The flood was on June 25th.
Oh, okay.
Yep,
I'm
the power
sorry.
went out on June 15th.
Okay.
Sorry.
No, that's fine.
Danielle?
Just a couple of questions. So is there any policy that says if we get one bid back, that we have to take it back out to bid?
Well,
No,
the state.
that was
it's a
just
state.
the direction of the board previously, so I
Right.
wanted to get approval from the board.
Okay, and then my only suggestion, and I love Sue's suggestion, is asking other districts, does the company have any type of rating you can share with us? Do they have like?
I did not look it up, but I can
Okay.
find all that information. Like I said, I didn't want to move forward with it if we were going to go back out to bid.
Okay, thanks.
Nadia?
So you said that there's 2 bids? Were they both?
Just
There was one bid,
No, she
only
said
one
that
company
there
bid.
was one in July, so you're not going to count that.
No, there was only
Oh,
one.
the one altogether.
One
Yeah.
altogether for the transformer.
Yeah.
No other company bid.
Okay, and I agree with Sue. I mean, you're saying 2 months to 1 year, so we don't want to take a chance on that, I
Yeah,
think.
Yeah, plus I believe this is a transformer, that's something that's spec'd
Yeah.
out and has to be built.
Correct.
Right, okay. Mo?
Yeah, first of all, thank you, and I'm a big advocate for the multiple bids for many reasons, and I think it protects the school district in the long run. It helps save money, and it gives us more assurances for after-the-fact installations. But I respect what you're saying, and if there was only one, as long as all parties were given equal access at the same time and not prior to,
Correct.
I think we have to move forward, so.
Okay,
And
then
then-
I will go ahead and get the references
Yeah.
and verify all of that before I allow Dr. Masalam to sign off on it and make sure that they're viable.
And lastly, this is a unit that's been leaking oil, correct? Correct. Yeah, so I'm gonna have to
on its
agree.
last legs.
Yeah, it may not be down now.
Right.
But I think it's shown that it's not trustworthy.
Correct.
Mr. Chair. And
Najat?
that is like, if that goes down, the entire district goes down, correct? Is that what?
My understanding, the high school
Just the
goes
high
down,
school.
but the server goes
Server,
down.
yeah.
And so then,
Right.
yeah,
Then
correct.
we're
That's what it, so,
Mhm.
and I guess if everything falls in line with references, and, I mean, again, it's not the ideal situation, but given
Thank you.
circumstances.
I guess, Mr. Chair, if I
Yes.
can. I guess then my worry would be, what about if the references came back as
If the references
not
come back,
credible?
then we start the process over.
But then we're
and-
wasting more time, so what do you do?
Right.
Well, the information is already,
It's already
It's already been
printed, it's already
prepared, yeah.
being, I just have to adjust the time dates, and actually I can shorten
It's
the
the
length.
6-week timeframe.
Yeah, I can
so-
shorten the length by 2 weeks because it's already been out there once.
Okay.
And getting the references and the rating shouldn't take more than a day or two.
I can do that tomorrow.
And if there's any flags, I'm sure you'll let us know.
Of course.
Okay. All right.
I do have one other thing.
Yes.
That wasn't on the agenda, only because we
Well,
do.
it is on the agenda for the regular session, because we're gonna have the architects come in. But we wanted to give you some preliminary numbers real quick prior to the architect presentation, so that you're aware of the numbers that we're using in making this decision, this recommendation for these additional classrooms.
So it's on the regular meeting, but it wasn't on my study sessions.
We figure since we have another 7 minutes, might be a good time, we're trying to be as efficient as possible.
So I have a question.
Yes, Sue?
So, quick question on this. Did we look at a 5-year growth rate on this in deciding how many classrooms we needed? I just don't want to get to a point where we said 3 classrooms at Highview, for example, and all of a sudden, 3 years from now, we find, oh, we wish we would have did 5.
So we did a 3-year.
Okay?
We didn't do a 5-year, we did a 3-year because the numbers started jumping up 3 years ago.
Okay?
And Penny will walk you through this. It'll show you where we're at based on our projections and what we currently have. Also, Penny's going to illustrate to you how many current classrooms we have in place, how many we're short at each building. And then there's a second page of if we complete the Berwyn project, how that's going to impact as well, so that you're well aware of both situations.
Okay.
So on the first page, you have enrollment by building for the fall enrollment. So it goes from 18-19, 19-20, 20-21, and then our projected 21-22 enrollment. When we do the projected 21 and 22 enrollment, that is still taking into account, we have a lot of families that register in August and early September. So those individuals are not on here yet. So we do anticipate these numbers to go up to closer to 4,000, even to above last year's numbers. But because this is what's enrolled right at the moment, this is what we utilized. If you look at CAP, they have 2 classrooms with a max capacity of 60. There's 2 rooms available. There's 2 rooms needed, so they're set, okay? When you look at
Mr. Chair.
Highview, yes, ma'am.
Oops, I'm
I'm sorry, CAP, wasn't there?
The advanced placement program.
Correct, but didn't we decide to do something with that?
We're enhancing it. We're making it more rigorous. We're changing
Okay.
the format of it. We're not eliminating it.
Okay.
We're not starting in 2nd grade, we're starting in 3rd grade. And as we're building to get more into a STEM program to feed middle school to high school for additional rigor.
And less of a free-for-all.
Correct. And a harder, and actually.
For lack of a better term.
Yeah, and actually, you have to score within a certain percentage range each year to stay in CAP.
And we're still open to outside district?
Well, it's open to inside first. If we fill inside, then we
Okay.
stop.
Yes.
What was the max capacity for CHS and RMS?
I did not do that because we weren't looking at those numbers right at the moment. So I did not do that for this year. Highview, so at Highview, you can see that we have a max capacity of 450 students. We have 15 rooms available, but we have 457 students. So that means that we really do need an extra classroom. Otherwise, the class capacity is going to be over 30 in each grade level, in each class. Therefore, also, we have art and music on a cart right now. So we do not have classrooms for those. So in the addition that we would like to put in the 2 classrooms so that you can see for our 21-22 needs at Highview, we need 3 additional classrooms. That's just for next year alone. That doesn't include any growth that would be forthcoming. Okay? When you look at Hillcrest, you can see that our max capacity is at 390. Our projected right now is at 346. However, again, those classrooms are spread out so that we do need 13 classrooms. We have 13 classrooms at Hillcrest available, but art and music are on a cart, so we don't have those, so we'd like at least 2 classrooms for those. At Kinlock, we have projected right now 497 students with a capacity of 528 students. However, the way the student numbers are broken down, we actually have only 19 classes available, but we need 20. Therefore, we also need 2 additional, so at Kinlock, we need 3 additional classes to get through the year this year.
If I may add real quick, Mr. President,
Yes.
Board. So please, I ask the board to keep this in mind. We're not looking at what we need just for next year. This is long-term as well. This is where we're gonna be in 3-4 years from now. And the key thing to that is that our student enrollment, if you've seen these 3 years, where our projected number is and where our actual enrollment is, it's really close. And we all know August is when enrollees start coming in. Moreover, when you look at space, you have to look at how our schools are congested and the concentration of the students. So by moving forward with this project, this is going to allow us not to only solve our limited space deficiencies now, but also give us options for the future. And when the architects come in to present, they're going to present to you, the proposal with future options. And I want you to keep that in mind. The only school that we'd have the most difficult time adding to would be
Hillcrest.
because of land availability. But Highview and Kinlock, we have options. So I'd like the board to understand that this is not something just to solve our problem for next year. This is something to solve our problem moving forward.
And also with this building, with these additions to the elementaries to our current buildings, we can utilize the ESSER funds to do that, so it would not come out of the general fund at all. There would be no impact for these buildings to the general fund.
Mr. Chair.
Nadia?
So with Highview, when you say limited, where would those classes go?
When the architects come, they'll explain that all. We just wanted to give you those numbers now so that you know why they're presenting what they're presenting. I'm sorry, I don't want to get into it because then I meant speak incorrectly.
Nope, you're fine. Danielle?
So I know not getting into it too detailed in the architects and everything, just one thing to keep in mind. So across the board in the industry, whether it's classroom, whether it's conference rooms for businesses, everybody has COVID on the mind. And I would just like for you guys to ask the architects to do the same thing. So is there a way where even if we had to add extra classrooms and make the class sizes smaller, and I know that calls for more staff, but it's all about slowing the spread, right? So with COVID, with the flu, would it behoove us to try to look into a few more classrooms than this if we had the space? And being able to have smaller classroom size or bigger classroom square footage and spread the students out more?
That's what we did.
Okay.
We looked at the 2 options and we looked at the space available and we asked the architects to bump up the size of the classrooms to make them larger than the current size of our classrooms so we have larger spaces.
Okay.
It made more sense infrastructurally wise than it did to add more smaller classrooms. Because currently our classrooms, as stated, built in the 1950s, 1960s, and when our schools, and when our schools were built at that time, all schools were built to have 15 to 18 kids in a classroom.
Yeah, it's just a new world out there.
Yeah, oh yeah, no, and that's,
even the brick and mortar world, it's just something I'd like
yeah.
to make sure that the architects consider.
And that's why we can use ESSER funding for this, because we're making the
Exactly.
classrooms larger.
Absolutely.
The
Yes.
second page that you have takes into consideration when
If,
if Berwyn is obtained. That way, the students are moved
if
out
there's a
of.
partnership between the city and the school district
Correct.
for the use of Berwyn.
Thank you.
Nadia? I saw yours, but Nadia would.
I guess I read about Kinlock and the library.
Yes.
Who's putting that up?
Our staff, our maintenance staff.
Our maintenance staff is?
Yes.
Are you involved in that, Scott? Okay, I mean, it's going to be.
It's
I'm-
temporary.
Yeah.
This is
Oh,
just,
this
that's
is
just
just a
temporary
It's
solution.
just temporary.
So half of the library will still be there and the other half, do we have enough room in there to do that?
Yes.
It's a temporary solution until we have the additional classrooms built, because we have nowhere else to put these kindergarten
They're
students.
using the library anyways currently.
Our staff there has been phenomenal. They've done a great job adjusting. Everybody knows that we are in a situation that we have to have temporary solutions until we have our finalized solutions. That wall will come down once the classrooms are built.
Salma?
Is there something we don't know, because all your projections have the common theme of declining? And is it possible to build up instead of wide, infrastructurally?
Cost-wise, it's not efficient. Because when you go to build up, the problem is you gotta look at foundation, you gotta look at engineering. We have the land space available at the schools. Kristen, I'm sorry, I think the architects are trying to come in. We have the land space available at the schools right now to build out. And in 2 of the schools, we have space to even go further if we need to in the future. The only school that we would ever have to consider going up on at this point would be Hillcrest, right?
Yeah, correct.
Oh, but the
Foundation
problem
there?
is, the foundation isn't strong enough to go up there.
At any of the schools?
And Hillcrest, for sure.
I'm saying,
We'd have to do an engineering survey, we don't know.
from what I understood, none of the foundations were strong enough to go up.
We know Hillcrest isn't, we know for sure Hillcrest isn't, but we'd have to do an engineering survey on the other schools to identify that.
Sure.
Danielle?
Just one thing everybody should keep in mind too is building up causes a lot more interruption to your infrastructure during class time. And the only reason I know that is I learned the hard way with my own personal project at home. So it not only requires taking the roof off, it literally requires taking the interior ceiling off.
Yeah.
So everything needs to be removed. Students need to be removed. Supplies need to be removed. It's a living nightmare, I think. So if we have the space to go back or out, I think that's like the best option for the students and us.
I'm going to entertain a couple more questions because we are on
Yeah, we're all
out of
set.
time.
We're all set.
So, Najat, did you, yes or no? No? Okay.
no, that was good.
Nadia?
I guess my question would be to Scott, what is your take on all this? Are these things that the board is asking possible if we wanted to go up? I mean,
From my understanding, once they do their site analysis, the footings and integrity was only based on a single-story building.
okay.
High view footings did accommodate 2 stories only in a portion. That's why I believe that we're targeting going outwards instead of upwards.
Okay, thank you.
Sue?
And I want to say about 7-ish years ago, maybe 8, I was very new to the board. The previous Scott, which was Ron, came before us and we talked about this, and he said that they had checked this and none of the buildings would allow to be a double story.
Yeah.
I don't know where he got that information, but I vividly remember him saying that.
I heard that too. I heard it somewhere too.
I mean, I know that it had to be checked by structural engineers.
And I
not just
don't know
somebody
if we
taking
went
a look.
out and had structural
Yeah.
engineers that we paid, or if Scott knew somebody that looked. Again, it was within literally my first 2 months on the board, so I don't remember the, specifics, but I remember him coming forth. So,
No, you're.
just, do you remember
Yeah,
that?
I do. And again, I don't remember whether or not there was a staff that was paid to do it, but, and I think this was pre one of the bonds.
Yes, it was, absolutely.
Because the issue was the high school. The issue was the high school.
Yeah.
And I believe they wanted to take the library and move it to the front of the building
Yeah,
and make
right.
the library classrooms.
Yeah.
But then it was the issue of can certain sections of that area go up? And then it came into no, because they'd have to bring in earth and take out roofs and create, what do you call it, egress for fires and so on. And it just became a money pit, to say the least. Okay, we have no other questions, comments, concerns, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask for a motion to close this meeting out from our study session.
So moved.
So I have support from Sue, support from Mo, that we close our meeting out at, let me just get a time, 6:36.